Senator Ferdinand.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Let me begin by joining the rest of our colleagues in welcoming you to this honorable House and congratulating you on your appointment and wishing that our customary high standards of conduct and deliberations will be ably facilitated with your guidance. I want to also just share a word and thank your predecessor, the former president, who, of course, has taken up duty in the lower house, and to say that we were quite pleased to work with him and to thank him for the guidance and the leadership that he provided as he presided over this honorable house. I look forward to the same and working with you in that regard. Madam President, before I delve into the actual presentation regarding the estimates, I want to note that earlier on I listened to the presentation by the leader of government business, and for about 35 minutes or so of the presentation, I listened and I heard nothing related to the estimates and the appropriation bill. And for that period of time, I had to endure stuff about the two parties, UWP, Labour Party, Facebook posts, and calling of names, and who is king and who is not king. And but anyway, it came to an end at some point. And I think when he attempted to delve into the estimates, there was a lot of difficulty even in finding the content. I can assure you, Madam President, that I do not wish to follow that same pattern, and I will stick to what I've been doing, which is to speak to the issues relating to the debate and to make my substantive contribution. I want to borrow from one of the few things that was mentioned, just to precede my presentation, and say that I heard quite a lot about fighting. I think the book of Exodus was quoted earlier, and that we have to fight and fight. Now, in government and in opposition, I expect us to be performing, but I keep hearing fight and fight. Madam President, the only fight that I believe we have on our hands right now is a fight for St. Lucians to stay alive. That is the only fight that I think we have on our hands. A fight for St. Lucians to try to stay alive. And so I want to say, Madam Speaker, Madam President, before anything else, that the estimates and the policy debate, I witnessed it, and I listened, and I realized that there was a definite disconnect, no coherence between what was going on in the estimates of expenditure and what we learned or listened to in the policy debate. In fact, a number of the policy statements that were made by the Honorable Prime Minister and other members of the lower house, and from what I've heard today, suggest that there is a big disconnect. In fact, after the lower house debate ended, I was hoping that when we came to the upper house, that I would have seen somewhat of an improvement. But to my disappointment, it got progressively worse. And so if, even in the policy pronouncements, even at the level where the Prime Minister and his colleagues present the estimates and then present the policy debate, that you can see that level of disparity. It tells you definitely that there is a problem with what direction the country is taking and where the government wants to go. So, Madam President, I, of course, will not be able to speak to every issue, but I will endeavor to focus on those that, first of all, I think relate to the areas that I am more learned and proficient in, as well as areas that I think are very critical to the populace, to our voters, to our St. Lucian public. And, Madam President, in that case, I just want to begin by saying that one of the very obvious deficiencies, if I could call them, regarding what we have heard, is that the government has not been able to deliver on some of the critical promises that it has made. And I remember there were two things that stood out. On the premise of the government running the elections, promised the St. Lucians that there would be some relief regarding taxing. And there were too many taxes. St. Lucians were overburdened with taxes. Now, I don't think that there is any problem or anything wrong in trying to reduce taxation. I think every taxpayer, every citizen wants to know that a government is endeavoring to reduce taxation. But what have we seen, Madam President? Instead of any reduction, and the argument of the 2.5% VAT has been properly ventilated, so I will not even go into that. What we have seen is the introduction of new taxes. These guys, in whatever way you want to call them, you want to call it gas tax and say you put it in lockbox to do roads. You want to say that you're going to have health insurance and therefore people will have to pay towards premium. It is still a tax. And so the first pronouncement that the government is going to do something about taxes, Madam President, I'm afraid that has not happened. Madam President, I sat in the lower house and listened with much interest to the Minister for Education, and I was very curious about what would have happened, because I remember last year around this time when I spoke, I made a point that there was a very serious void regarding the policies and the focus on our human resource. One of my colleagues earlier referred to it as human resource capital. And we know what that means, Madam President. And I think he was very correct, that as a country, we cannot just invest in what we call concrete and steel, or in buildings and structures. If we want to progress, we have to invest in people. And as a developing country, as what we call a third world country, as a small economy, our only hope is to invest in our human capital. And if a government wants to talk about resilience, I think that was the central theme of the debate. The only way you can build resilience is in the people. You can't build resilience in buildings. Yes, you have to fix roads and so on, but you can't build resilience by, in concrete and steel. That kind of resilience will probably resist or deal with hurricanes and storms, but it cannot bring you prosperity. People are your most important resource in a country like ours. And I would want to see that this government makes a definite statement, in word or in deed, and show us that they are investing or they are interested in the human resource. And so, Madam President, throughout my presentation tonight or this evening, I intend to point out where I think or where I have observed that this is not happening. I am a product of the system of the human resource capital through schooling, community empowerment, youth and sports development, nurturing, and so on. This makes you who you are. And if we cannot continue or improve on the infrastructure, and I'm not talking about steel and concrete, the infrastructure that is in place to build on that, then we can spend as many millions or hundreds or thousand millions, whatever we want to call them. It is not going to redound to any prosperity in this country. Madam President, I heard the Minister of Education speak about curriculum development and the use of technology. Very nice, and I am very happy to hear those words being pronounced, or these pronouncements made. But Madam President, That is not new. There are new terms that are being used now, GINet initiative. This is not new, Madam President. I was hoping to get, and when you talk about innovation, technology and innovation, every second of the day, there are new innovations and new things coming out in the world of technology. What is this? What is new on the market regarding education and innovation? GINet is basically another word, as far as I can see, for an initiative that the government of the Labour Party, that we don't like to talk about, had initiated since 2015 under Jimmy Fletcher. That was an initiative that had started a long time ago. There was training for ICT, for teachers, students, and principals. At the time, as a principal, I underwent some of that training. They used to call it a driver's license for principals and teachers, to basically make you competent in what the students are learning, so that when you have to implement it in the schools, you are not alien to it. You know what is going on. Since 2015, Madam President, initiated under the Ministry of Sustainable Development. But the minister comes into this house and talks about it as if it's bread from heaven and we never heard about it. Nothing new, Madam President. And for students and children who are listening to what our government is offering young people and the hope that we promise them, technology is something they're very excited about. And having removed the laptop program, Madam President, I'll get to that a little later. I was really hoping that I would have heard of something that was exciting, fresh, and that would have motivated the average young person who is in school. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. Madam President, I heard about $7 million in the budget statement being allocated to the silting rivers and ravines. And I'm saying, Madam President, I understand this thing about climate change, of course, and building resilience, which is a nice theme, and disaster mitigation, fine. If you are going to tell me that you're going to take $7 million to the silt rivers and ravines, we know what a ravine is. A ravine, you know, how many ravines do we have? So we're going to go around the silting ravines in Chic and in Oulebois and, you know, those places, Wavin Khan, Wavin Goudet, before we fix the Angers Secondary School and the Migu Secondary School, before we make sure that the Blanchard Combined School is in good shape. I have no problems in the silting rivers. I understand how it can mitigate against flooding and so on. But you're talking about, I heard the Prime Minister mention ravines. You know? Maybe he didn't understand the difference between the two. But if you're going to go to that extent and say you're spending $7 million, and when you compare that with the allocation in education, it's appalling, Madam President. It's appalling. Madam President, I sat in this Honorable House as an observer and listened to the Minister of Agriculture, and he's a member for Babonneau, my good friend, boasting and beating his chest about starting a laptop program for the students in Babonneau, or having started and continuing, and he's going to improve on a laptop program, Madam President, a laptop program, the same laptop program that we instituted as a government for every single St. Lucian child. That was stopped because every single child, yes, every child. Every child. And I will proceed, every child. We started with a certain form, and by the second year, we had 2 extra forms. And by now, we would have had every child from Form 2 to 5. Yes, because we never stopped. We started with Form 3. By the following year, it got better. It kept getting better. And even if it was for one form, Madam President, if the government put something in place for every child to benefit, and we found that it was so bad that we stopped it. Instead, we gave computers to certain schools, to private schools. And now I'm listening to a member of the lower house boasting and gloating about a laptop program for students who did well at common entrance and so on, as if only certain people at the discretion of politicians should be getting laptops. Is that what I'm hearing? So only students who have, and that is where we are making the mistake, Madam President. This separation And this hierarchy thing with our students is what is killing our education system. That is why our late developers have no chance to succeed. Some of us sitting in this honorable house, if we had that system in the time we went to school, we would never have gotten degrees. There are children who develop late. We are segregating. How could you tell me that something is not good as a policy and for all the children of the country, but you can have it in your constituency and make mileage, political mileage, by giving some students and looking good and saying, I gave laptops to children in Babylon, or in whatever constituency. I don't want to pick on a member from Babylon, but since he was the one who said it, I'm picking up from that. Madam President, this is hypocrisy. It is. If you're against laptops, you're against laptops, because the argument that was given was that it is better to put computer labs in schools and equip them, and then instead of giving every child a laptop because the children engage in all kinds of things. I was a school principal, and I agree that some of the students who received laptops did not use it for the right purpose all of the time. We know that. And that we'll never be able to control what a child does with a laptop everywhere he goes. But at least one laptop in a household gives the opportunity for not only the child, but for others in the household to be empowered. And so if you're against laptops for all schools and all students, why are you boasting about it for your students in your constituency as if it's such a great achievement? Hypocrisy, Madam President. Hypocrisy. Madam President, I listened and I was paying attention to training. And I think training was a theme, part of a sub-theme in this government's budget. Training. There was allocation for training in several different departments. But that same training that we're talking about was criticized by the Prime Minister when it comes to teachers. And he can try his best to try to retract and say he misspoke. He cannot take it back. That our teachers, basically their qualifications were questioned. And I remember the teachers' union came out and spoke about it. I spoke about it. That you're questioning the qualifications of teachers in St. Lucia, who upon completion of their teacher training can be recruited in any university, and even get exempted from their first 2 years because of the teacher training that the Prime Minister thought was not adequate. And to make it worse, if you believe that the training was not adequate, and you're going to come in 2018, 2019 in your budget estimates or in your budget speech, I was hoping that you would have offered some kind of, remedy for that situation. I would have heard something new, something, interesting for teacher training. But what do we have? I know they complained about Sir Arthur Lewis and the state of the place, yes. But look at the teacher training program that is in place, Madam President. Watered down. Stop the primary program. Have the B.Ed program where a teacher can become a graduate while still earning a living. Stopped it and made it part-time. So now teachers from Soufrière and Vieux-Fort and Choiseul have to come to Castries in the evening and try and rush to get a little tuition and go back to their families in the middle of the night. When that was offered full-time at Sir Arthur Lewis Community College. In 2 years, you could walk away with a bachelor's degree that was certified by the University of the West Indies, and it says K-Ville campus, and it's authentic. Madam President, where is the training? Even the home economics program, and I like the idea that, because I heard it being mentioned, that the curriculum is not compatible with the workforce. I agree. As a teacher, I always said that. I always thought that we were falling short as a government, as a people, from way back when it comes to the quality of the curriculum as per how it relates to the job market and persons becoming competent and being self-sufficient. I agree. I always thought that it was better to have a bigger focus on technical education and skill and competence training rather than just academics. I agree. But if you are going to bring that argument forward, where in the budget, where in your estimates have you backed it up with some action? Where? So, Madam President, I am appalled because I have not seen it. And I have been speaking about it from the time I entered this honorable house. And I will continue to advocate for it. While we have watered down the teacher training program, Madam President, I don't think some of the other training programs have been watered down. I don't think CHTTI has been watered down. I will reserve some of my comments on that until I hear more about it, because I don't want to speculate too much. I realized in the last budget it was quite, I didn't hear much. It was a kind of a hush story. So I'm waiting to hear what next for that institution that has replaced something that was working already. Madam President, curriculum reform was a big talking point. Prime Minister had a whole press conference on that. Curriculum reform. Who doesn't want curriculum reform? That is part of growing an education system. The whole world does that, and there's nothing wrong with curriculum reform. It was even juxtaposed against repairing schools. Give me, I'll quote him, give me a new school or a new curriculum, and we cannot spend money on schools and whatever. But I figure he has had second thoughts, and now I'm hearing that we're going to repair schools, and I'm very grateful to hear that. Curriculum reform is important. But, Madam President, if you are going to reform the curriculum, how are you going to do that? Who are the persons who are responsible for curriculum reform in St. Lucia, in our education system? The Prime Minister and the Minister of Education speak about this thing as if it is something where you're going to have a whole set of consultants to come in to tell you what you already know. Madam President, let me remind the government, and I heard, I think it was my colleague Senator Mangal who said, when something is good, why do you want to break it down? He reinvent the wheel. I think earlier on he alluded to that. And he's right. Madam President, as we speak, in St. Lucia, the education system has a department called Curriculum and Materials Development Unit, CAMDU. It is situated on the Mon. There are curriculum specialists trained with all kinds of technical knowledge. We have a curriculum specialist for mathematics. We have one for English. We have one for special education. We have a curriculum specialist for social studies. We have one for music. We have one in every strand, every subsection of the education system. And these are not people who are politically appointed, thank God. They are professionals who have to be interviewed, who have to be trained, and who know what they're doing. Why is it that we need to be making all that noise about curriculum reform when we have a unit, Madam President, that exists in our country within the education system that can do that? I can say, well, if you don't think that CAMDU is doing a good enough job, get your technocrats, sit down with the CAMDU department, and do what you have to do. If you have to put some money to do something about, if it's the buildings up there that are not in good shape, if you think that the curriculum specialists do not have enough support, then do that. But what is the big hoorah about curriculum development as if it's something that we never heard about? And how are you going to develop this curriculum? Up to this day, Madam President, I have not heard one specific strategy from this government about how they're going to achieve that curriculum reform. No one has gone to any department or any school to consult with anyone about it. And just a bit of advice, if you want to do curriculum reform, you have to begin from the bottom, from the bottom up. Because the people you are doing it for will inform you as to what you need to do. That's just a bit of advice, and it's for free. I'm not charging any consultant fees for that one. Okay? I know we're big on consultancy, but that one is free. I'm not charging. So, Madam President, there are so many things that I want to speak about, but I will try my best within the time that I am permitted to condense my presentation. But I do not want to leave out some of those. Madam President, we heard about NAPS, National Apprenticeship Program. Because the people were promised jobs and relief and all those fancy things, and St. Lucians will, Vieux-Fort will be transformed and all of that, especially in the South. And there is a strategic move to try to make things look good when it comes to the people of the South. Madam President, I am a proud Southerner. I am from Deriso. I was born and raised in the community of Deriso in Miku South. I am from the South. And I believe that the South need better. I agree. But don't come and tell the people of the South that you are taking teachers. Already we have issues with the education system. You're taking teachers from the schools on secondment, putting them in offices to take charge of NAPS, assign $7 million and say you have an apprenticeship program. What is it you are doing? What kind of apprenticeship program? I even saw an ad, something about if you're looking for a job and so on. Take a teacher from his school, put him in an office, and they call it NAPS, and give him a Calypsonian as his assistant, I suppose, to keep him awake because he'll be napping. And if you really want to understand what I'm saying, Madam President, because I will not call anybody's names in this honorable house, I'm a gentleman. Sure. You can take a walk upstairs the Daha building in Beaufort, and there's a little office there. Newly created, a new job that never existed for NAPS. And there are 2 people in that office. They are the ones who are the policy makers and the brain boxes to create employment. NAPS for St. Lucian young people. $7 million. No strategy, no implementation plan, nothing. But you're going to give people jobs using NAPS. Madam President, there is nobody in the South who is dunce and silly enough to think that this is going to work. I have no problems in making pronouncements. I would love anything that you're going to do to get jobs and get employment opportunities for people in the South and people in the North and East and West. But when you take you take people out of their classrooms and you put them in a little box somewhere and you give them a Calypsonian, what is it? What is it about? Calypso season is in July. We don't have Calypso in the NAPS program. So, Madam President, these are some of the things that are being offered to our people. And we are talking about resilience and building our human resource capital. I am utterly disappointed and dissatisfied with what I'm hearing. All I do when I speak in this honorable house is to call on the government to do what they're promising and to show some slate and stop just throwing around nice fancy terms as if there is something in it that people will not see. We read through that. Madam President, let me move on and speak a little bit about leadership in the education system. What kind of leadership is being provided by the Ministry of Education? I know that it's coupled with sustainable development, gender relations, and some other departments. But I want to remind the government that that Ministry of Sustainable Development and so on has a Department of Education. And that whoever has been given the responsibility, my very good friend, I have no problem with that, because we're from the same district, that something needs to be, there needs to be some fire that has to be lit under that department or under the persons put in charge. What kind of leadership is being provided in that department? And I know some reference was made to a number of acting appointments, and that is true. When people are in acting appointments in any department, Madam President, they are uncertain about the future of their jobs, and there's a lot of underachievement that you will register. Key positions in the Ministry of Education: permanent secretaries, chief education officer, deputy chief education officer for planning, deputy chief education officer for instruction. All of those, and you also have, DEOs, even principals, acting positions. I had an experience with an acting member of my staff as a principal. Every 6 months, I had to find a replacement. As soon as the individuals realized they were acting, they left, because they know that it's not a permanent job, that they're going to move on. And I kept complaining until finally I got a permanent appointment to settle. And it was a very important position at the school. Just to protect the individual's identity, I will not state the position. But it was a very important position at any secondary school. And I struggled for years because the individual kept acting, and every time they realized that I had to appraise them every 6 months because they were acting, they found another job. I'm not learning this. There's a part of this I'm not learning. Anyhow, Madam President, early childhood education. We're talking about our young people. Our young people, and I'm speaking.
Senator Ferdinand, you have 15 minutes remaining to conclude your contribution.
Yes. Thank you, Madam President. I would like to invoke Standing Orders 45-3 to allow Senator Guibion to speak on to another 30 minutes to conclude his presentation.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order 35-3 be invoked to allow Senator Ferdinand an additional 30 minutes to make his contribution. I now put the question. As many who are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many who are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, colleagues. I will try to make sure that I complete within that time. Madam President, I was speaking to early childhood education. The foundation for any child, for anybody, determines what happens for the rest of their lives. The Prime Minister spoke about 43%. Started with preschool, then it went to primary school. I don't really care what school he was referring to. But I think that the underlying message was not the percentage, but that there was something wrong with our education attainment levels, especially among males. And I want to also mention, Madam President, that when I consulted the social and economic review on page 80, I noted that it was a 67.5% dropout rate among our boys in schools. And that is alarming. I'm very concerned about that. And I believe the Minister for National Security would be very concerned about that too, because most of these boys are the ones who end up, in his care, in the care of his ministry. Yes. 67% of the dropouts are boys. Okay. In other words, 2/3 of the dropouts in schools are boys. Correct, right. If we had 67% dropouts, that would be a catastrophe. So it means that the majority of our dropouts in schools are boys. And so in early childhood education, if the Prime Minister is talking about, attainment levels of males in St. Lucia being so bad, I would expect the next thing he would say, whether he was right or wrong, I don't care what percentage he tried to use. I mean, that's for debate. But the point is, there's a problem. How are you addressing the problem? You see, Madam President, I think this government has developed a habit of identifying problems that they either perceive to have inherited or try to make us believe they inherited. And all they do is to say they have a problem and complain about it, complain about the problem, and complain about why the Labour Party didn't do it. Madam President, the government, the people of St. Lucia who voted this government in, and they remind us of it every minute. The people voted us in and they voted you out. Yes, they did. But they voted you in to solve the problems that you promised them to solve. And not to tell them about the problem and remind them that we caused it. That doesn't solve the problem. The more you tell people about, you're just frustrating them. They know the problems already. If you perceive there's a problem and you have come into office, solve it. Work towards solving it. And I want to commend the member, the Minister for National Security, because he's one of those that has made at least a little step in that direction, and I hope he follows up. Take the advice of the opposition and act on it. The opposition leader made a suggestion, he acted on it, and I attended in his support. And I contributed. That's how you do it. Stop complaining about the problems that you perceive to have been, I said perceived, because some of the problems, I think they were created in the mind. Some of these problems, they can't even show where it exists. Doing all kinds of inquiries, all kinds of I don't want to use the word investigation, it's not a good word today. All kinds of audits to find problems that they perceive to be there, St. Jude and all of that. And when they find a problem, or when they say they find a problem, they come back and they complain to you about it. And not one step is being taken to address it. Madam President, let me move quickly. Early childhood education, I was saying. I'll just say one thing about that. The Prime Minister wanted to cry when he spoke about that. But I come from a community where he's a district rep. And I can tell you, in the part of the community called Diga, there is a preschool with over 25 students, little children, less than 5 years old, with no water, no electricity. The administrator has been complaining. You have children subjected to that kind of treatment and condition in Miku South. Right? And by the way, there was water and there was electricity in 2016. There was, because I held meetings there. I held town hall meetings in that specific place, location, in the evening, and there was water. So the problem, that's one of the problems they can't pin on us, because it was there when we demitted office, but there is none now. And the Prime Minister comes in this honorable house to pretend that he wants to cry because he loves the children so much. But he needs to go and attend to that problem.
Yes.
That's just one example, and I'm not going to spend the rest of the night on that. Madam President, I also heard about a move towards special needs education. And the Dennery Infant School was mentioned as one of those places where the government is looking to integrate the special needs students into that school because there is space. It's a new school and there is extra space, and the Minister of Education quite eloquently spoke to that they're planning to integrate students into the new school as well as the former infant school. That sounds fantastic, to integrate so that they wouldn't have to go all the way to Vieux Fort or come up to Castries. Great. But you know what, Madam President? That's one of the other issues I have. Do you know that there has been no effort towards doing anything to facilitate that integration process? You think you're going to just take children with special needs and dump them in a mainstream school? Madam President, that is a problem I have. Make announcements that sound nice. At least put in a sentence that explains how you're going to do that integration or when you're going to do it. Because we all know that special needs students or special needs people require special needs. Do we even have special needs teachers in that place? And what is the approach? Just make a nice statement. Sounds good. Well, I look forward to it. I hope that it's done. I would be very pleased to know that students from the Dennery Basin, from where my colleague lives, who have special needs, will be integrated properly into the mainstream school system, and that there will be resources provided to that effect. School repairs, Madam President. School repairs. Roman numeral 4 in the estimates refers to $1.2 million that's been allocated. Loan or grant. For me, you see these nitty-gritties. I'm not really, when I come to this honorable house, I'm not into looking for all those things. I just look at the issue and find out whether the issue is relevant to what's going on. That's me. I'm not any economist for me to go and debate where money is coming from. That's not my role. Right? But Madam President, all I'm saying is, if you are going to take money that was previously allocated to infrastructure and put it in under the Education Department to be managed by the Ministry of Education for repair of schools, I would want to know, what are you going to do with the department known as Plant and Equipment on Stores and Supplies that deals with that? There is a department there. And I do not like to speak about rumors, but I just want to ask a question as to whether there are persons who have been retired who are going to be brought back into the system to suck up on these monies. I'm going to watch very closely. And as I say, Madam President, I will not speculate. If that happens, I will be back in this honorable house to update you and the rest of St. Lucia about it. But I hope that is not what is going to happen in the face of our issues with unemployment. School feeding program, Madam President, I heard that we were promised that it would be doubled. I hasten to say that there has been replacements, but I don't know about the doubling of the quantity or the quality of food or any other inputs regarding that program in our schools at present. I look forward to this fiscal year to see what happens. Madam President, there is something that we used to call, or we knew as the Child Friendly School Initiative that UNICEF backed up. I didn't hear one word of it mentioned in the budget. I know Miku Secondary School was the first secondary school that was piloted in that program, and we had a couple of primary schools. It's a very important initiative. It addresses a lot of the issues that we have. It speaks to the non-use or the avoidance of corporal punishment, which I'm sure, again, my Minister of National Security will welcome, to stay away from the aggression and the corporal punishment, and innovative ways of schools being able to manage deviance and make it student-friendly. I did hear the student-friendly word being uttered by the minister, but here's an opportunity. We have something in place, and nothing was built on it. Yet you intend to address student-friendly schools and no child is left behind. You know, those nice catchphrases are being thrown around. No child left behind, friendly, and so on. But there are initiatives that are in place, and you don't speak to them. You don't have to invent it. It's already there. The Labour Party government had it in place. Nothing built on it. But you come and you just spew out the fancy tools. and hope it will stick. There's another example that I heard the Prime Minister use, Madam President, in justifying the Ojo Labs thing. I just call it that. The Ojo Labs concept. The Prime Minister boasted about, he spent about 2 minutes on a story about a young man who is now at Ojo Labs, and he's now able to develop his own programs and so on, and he's such an achievement, and the whole house went rumbling at, such an achievement. Madam President, let me share something with you. In 2009, as a principal, we took part in a science fair, and a young man from the Miku Secondary School was able to develop his own computer program in the Miku Secondary School computer lab with his teachers and his colleagues to have an animated volcanic reaction to support a model that he made for his science fair that we won. Placed first. And this young man went on to place first at the regional level. Madam President, the government of the day did not have to spend $5 billion for that to happen. It was happening with students, with teachers, within the school, through the education system. Why do we have to go to Ojo Labs for our children to learn programming? CXC, Madam President, the Caribbean Examination Council has replaced the technical component of the IT, the Information Technology Program, with what they call a general component. And the replacement by the technical with the general component, the difference was that they introduced programming as part of the curriculum. That's all they did. So a child now who writes IT and gets a grade 1, 2, or 3 is competent in programming, because that's the component that was introduced. Programming is part of the curriculum in schools. But the Prime Minister comes here as if everybody sitting around there knows nothing about programming and tells us about a story of a child at Ojo Labs, as if Ojo Labs is the only place where a young man can go and learn programming. I would advise the Prime Minister to take that $5 million and put it into programs in the schools to facilitate that, and put it into getting laptops for all our children to be able to go and sit in their own comfort and work on their skills of programming, of course aided by their teachers. There is no need for us to be giving anybody $5 million when we already have the facilities in place. In other words, Madam President, everything I have said so far is basically saying that there is nothing new under the sun. There is nothing new from all that I have heard. I will take a break from the Education Department for the rest of my presentation, and I'll quickly mention a couple other things. Madam President, sports. I heard about Center of Excellence in Sports and Center of Excellence in Culture, one in arts. Thank you, Madam. I believe the Minister is well placed to correct me on that. In arts and sports, one in Grosley, one in Alger. I think the Minister of Sports spoke about Grosley, and I'm hoping that the Minister responsible for culture will deal with the arts one. But Madam President, all I'm going to say is that I heard that the arts center is earmarked for Alger Secondary School, where I'm from, my community. Ask the teachers, ask the people from the community, ask anybody from that school, what do they know about this? That's all I'm going to say. Ask them what do they know about this big announcement and this big thing that has been spoken about for a while now. From last year, I spoke about it in this budget. It's a whole year, and we're still at the same point talking about it and making it seem that it's something that is in line to be done. But I'll wait a little longer. We also heard about a sporting hub in the eastern communities of Dennery, Deriso, Miku, artificial turf, FIFA standard. Unfortunately, some people in here don't remember that your humble servant, Madam President, has actually worked quite extensively in the area of sports development and was actually a FIFA assigned instructor. So I understand how FIFA works, and I know the standards. And I think we have somebody from the Olympic Committee here who would know a little bit more as well about certain standards when it comes to sporting facilities. And to tell St. Lucians that you're going to find some consultant from the United States of America who is going to come and give us artificial turf in tropical countries. You know, FIFA standard, you cannot use those two terms in the same sentence if you're talking about St. Lucia. FIFA standard artificial turf in Deriso, in Vieux-Fort and in Miku. Who are you fooling with this? Madam President, I'll move on. Healthcare, Madam President. And the Minister of Health is in the Senate, and I'm so happy because I know she'll be marking me. You know, it's like she'll be a very good central defender. She knows how to mark. She'll mark me and she'll keep me, you know. She's a good defender. You can't score when she's marking you. She's quite good. But I know she'll be paying attention, and I know she'll probably have a response which I hope will be refreshing. Healthcare, Madam President. I know it has been discussed extensively. We heard of national insurance replacing universal health care. My issue here is affordability and access. These are the two key issues with healthcare. Can you afford it, and is it accessible to all? If you can tell me yes to both of these, I'm okay. But when you speak about national health insurance, I want to know how the government is going to ensure that every St. Lucian can afford it and will be able to access it equitably. Equitably. And then we talk about the transition from the VH to the OKEU hospital. And I heard an announcement before the end of 2018. That would be wonderful news, Madam Minister of Health. If we can move into the OKEU hospital by the end of 2018, that would be great. All I want to ask is that move coming with privatization or any form of, you know, anything like that? Because you're not giving us, you know, don't give us the sweet with a coating of pepper. It needs to be a sweet, and it needs to be sweet. St. Jude Hospital, Madam President, after all the drama, all that has happened, what I heard from the Prime Minister is that Cabinet is only now weighing the pros and cons of completing St. Jude Hospital. 5 years you didn't do it, 4 years you didn't do it, whatever. I heard that. So, okay, right? So now, after 2 years, we are now considering the pros and cons. We didn't know the pros and the cons to decide whether we should build or demolish or whatever. And now I heard the Minister of Foreign Affairs in the Prime Minister's office speaking about ticks. And that got me very, 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 very scared. Because I have relatives who work there. I have friends who, you know, that's where I would go if I got sick. So in light of that, I think there's a new urgency regarding the stadium and the St. Jude Hospital. And I hope that the government has a plan to do something about it. Because I didn't hear about the ticks when we were there. But if the ticks came, that's a new challenge. So it means maybe they're sending us a warning that people can't send us. So we need to take heed. Madam President, housing. My dear colleague spoke about it. I'm not going to say much about it, but except to say that all these nice renderings we saw there is just part of the whole show. It has happened before. I came here, I've seen the renderings all over the place, 3D, all different types. And I don't want to put down my colleague there. I think he has good intentions. But all I will ask him is, through you, madam, is how much will certain people make by the completion of that thing there? That's all I'm going to ask. But I would love to know that all of these drawings are converted into real buildings and real structures. I'm for it. Great. And one more thing about housing, Madam President. I understood from the Prime Minister's statement that there will be some kind of temporary settlement in Angers-Dericeau. That's where I'm from. That's in Mico South. I want to ask, settlements for who? Because I'm familiar with the lands there, and most of it is Crown. And there are quite a few residents who actually own property there too. So who are the persons moving in? And there's not much room for people there. Angers is a very densely populated area. I just want to ask, does it have anything to do with accommodating persons from Vieux-Fort North and South with regard to DSH? Maybe someone can share some light on that. And if they are going to be occupying lands in the Angers area, whose lands? Who are the landowners? Is the government going to acquire land and certain people are going to make more money? Or is it going to be Crown lands that are going to be reclaimed? I don't know. But these are questions I'm just placing just for the Minister in the Housing Department to consider. Quickly, Madam Speaker, agriculture with regard to the fishing and farming. The Prime Minister spent 2 minutes. And if you go to the Prime Minister's address, pages 41, the bottom of page 40 to the end of page, to the middle of page 41. 2 minutes on what we consider one of the most important departments in St. Lucia, agriculture. 2 minutes, kind of quickie, 2 minutes. And from the 2 minutes, what I was able to gather is that the Fish Marketing Corporation is closed, marketing board has been closed, and there's a total liability of $7 million, $5 million from the marketing board and $2 million from the Fish Marketing Corporation. That's about what I got. I didn't hear anything about an intervention, but I heard about $5 million going to Ojo Labs. I just want to ask, when are the people at the Angers Gap, the fishermen who do spear diving and go to fish, when will they be able to sell their produce to me and others without having to stand up by the road in the dust? While the Prime Minister is talking about all those fancy things. And loving agriculture so much, even the Minister of Agriculture, when he spoke, when he made reference to Miku South, all I heard him say was, the Prime Minister knows about agriculture. He knows about agriculture. He knows about agriculture because he's the rep for Miku South and it's an agriculture area. That's why the Prime Minister knows about agriculture, because he's the rep of Miku South. And Madam President, we have people like Trimpe, Kaisi, Zo, Robot, and I'll say that one in Creole because these are my partners. I want them to follow me. Robot, Trimpe, Zo, Kaisi, camarade moi, Miku South. Moi vle zot di moi, si toutes ces produits zote pon mettre qui te kaya sur un bâtiment pour monter dans ces pays au nord là. Si un premier ministre a envoyé bâtiment vient collecter tout ça ba iso. That's all I'm going to ask them. National security, I can say that what I've heard is the CRB unit is going to be functional. I have not heard much new, but to his credit, the Minister of National Security did make some pronouncements earlier. But CRB is not new. I've worked with CRB before. And culture, Madam President, finally, I think, well, before culture, I just want to spend 30 seconds on CIP. Madam President, when the CIP issue was raised in this House, I remember the leader of the opposition warned the government. And before I complete that point, Madam, could you kindly let me know how much time I have?
I will in a second.
Thank you, Madam. When this CIP discussion started, I remember the leader of the opposition and the member, the honorable representative for Castries South, signaling all the warnings to this government about not tampering with the existing, let's put it this way, the existing templates, and explaining why.
Senator, you have 20 more minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. Very gracious. Explaining why this template was not to be tampered with. And not just saying don't do it, but explaining, giving a rationale for it. And there were things like due diligence. There were issues to do with the concept of being a chic and all the nice fancy words that were used. Premium destination, not lowering the cost of passports and so on. Due diligence. All of those things were explained. I think most St. Lucians now know a little bit more about CIP since that debate started. In fact, there was a negative resolution brought into this honorable House, Madam President, unprecedented, to address specifically CIP. And that seemed to have just been ignored. So what has happened to us? Well, Madam President, right now, you've heard it from other members of the House. The CIP department or the CIP issue seemed to have landed us in some trouble as a country. The latest news that we just heard about earlier is that the money laundering concerns from the U.S. State Department are now loud and clear. And it's been linked to the way that we handle some of these issues. Madam President, I think the U.S. is getting a little too much attention from us these days, for more than one reason. And it's not the type of attention that we want them to have or to be getting from us as a small nation. I think the U.S., it would be better if the U.S. is getting our attention with regard to recruiting young athletes and getting some kind of program for hiring, persons exporting labor and so on. Not for the kinds of things that I'm hearing these days. And so, Madam President, the member for the independent candidate spoke earlier about the brain drain, our human resource not going over and not coming back. That would be one of the issues that I would have maybe forgiven people for, but not that kind of attention, Madam President. And instead of taking heed to the warning signs that we were given, what has happened? Madam President, we are hearing it in the news now. Reference was made to it, so I don't want to be the one. I'm not going to give all the details because you know the details. That we are now, as a nation, as a country, we are now being linked to money laundering, and the U.S. State Department has once again has reason to be interested in what's going on, suspicious, if you want to call it, in our country. Now, I'm not going to talk about anything to do with Boko Haram and Al-Qaeda and those kinds of things. That is not part of my character. But I think it is a very ugly situation that St. Lucia does not need. We have a fragile tourism industry. We are a service provider, basically, as a country. And we do not want to cause any more anxiety in our tourism market or in terms of our reputation. So I think we need to be very careful moving forward and take heed of some of the warnings that are being issued from the contributions that are being made by our members.
Minister for Health and Wellness.
Madam President, I rise on a point of order 36A, just to find out from the Honorable Senator whether there is any official statement on what he is speaking about, St. Lucia being declared a money laundering state or country. I just would like to know the source of that information, Madam President.
I will yield, Madam. I will yield.
Minister for Home Affairs, Minister for Health and Wellness, you referenced Standing Order 36A. Is it 36A that you want to rely on? Senator Ferdinand.
Okay, Madam President, if I understand my colleague well, she wants me to reference a source. I'll reference a source that was referenced earlier. I'm not sure if she was listening, but I will remind her that the HTS News Online, it's right here, and she can probably just click on it. She will find there's an extensive article, and if you permit me, I may just read the caption. Just for her, yeah. The United States government has again flagged St. Lucia as a major, let me just give the caption, St. Lucia flagged in the U.S. money laundering report. That's the headline. The United States government has again flagged St. Lucia as a quote, open quotation marks, major laundering country, closed quotation marks. Local international criminal organizations exploit trading firms, include banks, to filter and wash monies through the financial system. Now, there's quite a lot, but let me just go to the next paragraph to just make the connection that she was asking. The International Narcotics Control Strategy Report, issued annually by the U.S. State Department, has singled out St. Lucia's Citizen by Investment Program out of concerns over political influence and quote-unquote exposure to local corruption. Now, I don't want to take the rest of there's quite a lot more, Madam President, but I just wanted to, if she wants, I can complete the sentence. The last sentence says, the State Department has advised the government to step up investigative capacity among law enforcement agencies to prosecute and cut off loopholes across the local financial sector. And I'm reading from an official news broadcasting agency, which is HTS News, St. Lucia, and I'm sure tonight in the headlines that would have probably featured. So, Madam President, I didn't make it up. I was just giving up-to-date, and that's what technology does, up-to-date information, current about the situation as it is. Okay? up-to-date information. So if, as they say, if I lie after HTS. So let's see. I didn't say it happened. I just said let's take heed of the warning signs. Right. So, Madam President, moving forward, culture and arts. I heard my colleague earlier, I know he's a cultural activist, make a plea on behalf of the cultural activists, let's say, community, and ask the government to consider them, don't forget them. And there's one thing I noticed the members of the government side love to do, Madam President. They love to talk about Sir John Compton, our hero, father of the nation. Of course I agree. What do you mean? I agree. Sir John was virtually the father giver at my wedding, Madam President. So don't think that I have any problems with this gentleman. Fine gentleman. Very close member, very close to my family and knows my people very well. So when they talk about Sir John, I know Sir John very well. Right? So, Madam Speaker, that Sir John, the late, whenever he assigned, and I want you to pay attention to where I'm going with this. Whenever Sir John Compton assigned his ministerial departments upon winning the government, you know about those things, eh? Yes, madam. Once upon a time. You can relate to that. Madam President, I quite appreciate the little, Sir John Compton, as father of the nation, every time he assigned ministerial departments, he usually, almost every time, assigned education and culture in the same ministry. Now, I don't think in his wisdom that was by accident. There was a message in this. While others may have changed it, I remember the Labour Party had human resource development and so on. Now we have innovation and so on. But Sir John always had culture. And if they are so proud about Sir John, it suggests that there is some measure of education that is integrated into culture, or vice versa, culture integrated in education. In other words, it's just as important. But I'm not surprised, Madam President, because the same way that education is being treated is the same way that culture is being treated. In families, you have ish legitime ek ish bata. So education and culture say ish bata. They're not part of the married, I don't know, I think the vernacular is very, very familiar. Legitimate and illegitimate children. The same kind of treatment that is being given to education by this government is the same kind of treatment that culture is getting. And even in the cluster, it sends a message. It's been watered down, Madam President. So I remember Sir John had spoken about building this new arts center. It was his vision. Okay? So there was a straight, and I'm not the one who goes out boasting about Sir John, They are. I respect the gentleman, but I don't go out gloating about him. They use it at their convenience because they know some people like to hate. But give some respect to the things that the man stood for. Give some respect to it. And do something about it. And let's start with the Walcott House on Grass Street. Let's start with that. So Derek, our former Nobel laureate, we know all that happened with that. And now I heard it's open, but, well, we should have a look to see if the concept is actually what it was intended for. So, Madam President, while I was very, very pleased to hear that there is some kind of effort to curtail the plan of interfering with the cultural center, I heard it was mentioned earlier, I'm pleased to hear that. I believe that there is still a high level of anxiety that exists among the cultural activists and the community. Because, you know why, Madam President? It's something that we've said before. I don't think that they really trust what the government is offering or delivering. They don't. They have to wait and see if it's going to happen before they say yes, it's going to happen. So in that case, I'm hoping that my colleague senator will shed some light on this and put it to rest so that the anxieties of the people in that area will be put to rest. So, Madam President, I think it's about time for me to wrap up. But before I do, I want to say and put in an extra word on behalf of the people who are part of our human resource capital and say that it is important for this government to recognize that in all the restructuring, rebasing, and all of those wonderful things that they're talking about, that the people who are most important, or what is most important to us as a nation, is the people. And they must give it a chance by showing and demonstrating. And I'm calling upon them again. This might be, if I've spoken in this house 10 times, I've said it 10 times, that this government needs to demonstrate to St. Lucians that they are prepared to invest and to pay attention to our human resource capital.
Senator Ferdinand, you now have 5 minutes left to conclude your
So
contribution.
I'm wrapping up. That is great. So, Madam President, that is my call, that is my plea on behalf of the people of the country, those who matter most. It's not about the bridges and the roads. They are important. It's not about the fancy fabricated or refurbishing of those nice buildings and Ojo labs and all of those things. Yes, they're nice. It's about what you're putting in place in your policies to address the critical resource, which is the people. And if we do that, I think we'll be eliminating a lot of the other problems that spill over into all the other departments of health, of national security, and education for sure, so that the social fabric of the country will be in better shape. And once your people are developed, once your people are in good shape, your economy is going to do well. So let's not go out there searching for all fancy formulas. The formula is very simple. Take care of the people, empower them, provide them with the opportunities to develop, stop talking about doing things and start doing the things you talk about. And once you do that, your country, your people are well placed for prosperity. Madam President, I want to thank you for your indulgence. And I hope that, if not all that I've said, but at least one or two of the suggestions and the observations that I've made will be taken seriously by this government. And going forward, we will see some measure of implementation on their part.